I woke up the next morning with a killer hangover. I had hoped that I would have no recollection of the previous night, but even my dreams acted as a reminder of what I'd almost done. I was so ashamed and embarrassed that for once, I actually cared about what people thought of me. Especially Agent Delta. I wasn't ready to face him, yet I couldn't just avoid him my whole life. I grudgingly got out of bed and carefully slipped out of my dress. I hastily took a shower as I imagined scrubbing off the filth that Hill contaminated me with. Once I was done, I dressed in my usual attire and downed a cup of black coffee with an aspirin pill. I sighed as I went out of my apartment. I went straight to the secret HQ where Martin Hill was being held. The thought of him made me feel flustered. As I entered the building, something unusual stirred within my gut. I looked around me to see if anything was out of the ordinary. Right away, I noticed that there were more security guards than usual. The difference wasn't hugely noticeable, yet their presence seemed to have increased the unease that I felt. Nothing else in particular caught my attention, aside from a handful of passing high-ranked secret members with blanched faces. I looked at them with a questioning glance. Once they left my line of sight, I turned my head away. I entered the elevator as I waited for my level to arrive. I shifted my weight from my hip to another to try to push aside my ease. Despite my discomfort, I made my way to the interrogation hallway as soon as the elevator door opened. The area was a few levels underground, as the subjects tend to get talkative. The prisoners we brought back were usually scum taken off the streets and enjoyed yelling out profanities of bringing down the seekers, and other appropriate comments I'd rather not mention. They were completely ruthless in their everyday handlings, but were surprisingly very knowledgeable about the phantoms. Martin Hill was no exception. I continued walking until I stood right outside the interrogation room. Inside was the one and only Martin Hill. He wasn't bound, however. Various warriors surrounded the walls on the inside. Sitting in front of him with their back towards me was whom I presumed was the interrogator. From the look on Hill's face, he was scared shitless, despite his best attempts at not appearing bothered. I let out a brief chuckle, as I could have only imagined how the interrogator threatened Hill to get him to sweat like that. I caught movement from the corner of my eye and turned around and saw Agent Delta walk towards me.
"Good morning, Agent Moore,"
he said politely. "Morning," I replied back cautiously. I didn't want to bring up any reminders from last night, yet Delta didn't seem to be upset by it. Instead, he stopped beside me and faced the observation window. His proximity made me feel even more edgy. I studied him discreetly as he observed the ongoing interrogation. His dark eyebrows narrowed in concentration. My gaze traced his masculine face, picking out all the detail I hadn't noticed before. He had a thin line of barely noticeable freckles spotting over his nose, adding a splash of color to his pale face. His lips were a pleasant shade of pink, and glistened in the light. My heart began beating harder the more I studied him. My breathing became shallower as I was falling into a trance.
"He seems to have a lot of knowledge on the phantoms,"
Agent Delta finally commented. I jumped slightly at the unexpected remark. The Guardian continued.
"Your contact was well informed."
I continued to examine Delta's neutral face, as I looked for any giveaway of his thoughts. He appeared too calm. There was no tightening of his facial muscles, no pressure on his lips. With no success, I answered back. Indeed, he was very well informed. Agent Delta merely glanced at me with a cocked eyebrow. I stared shamelessly into his light eyes, mentally demanding access to his inner being. His eyes were like molten silver as they stared back at me, just as intensely. I opened my mouth slightly as words timidly formed in my throat. Breaking us out of our tense stare-off was the sound of a door opening. We both looked away from each other and focused on the door. Coming out was the head warrior who had visited me at the hospital. "It's you," I stated in surprise. The man smiled gently.
"It's nice to see you again, Agent Moore. Though, I wish it were under better circumstances."
All too abruptly, the strong appearance of the head warrior broke down to reveal a very tired man. I gave a look of concern. "Are you all right?" The man sighed heavily.
I wish I was better, that's for sure,
he answered. Exhaustion was evident in his voice.
This man that you captured is indeed affiliated with the Phantoms, and it's much direr than we initially feared.
What happened? I asked.
Your contact was correct about one thing. Martin Hill has indeed had dealings with the Phantoms. What we didn't anticipate was the degree to which he has had these transactions with them.
For a moment, the head warrior, a person who has received the toughest and longest training out of all the secret agents, looked downright frightened. The fact that he was scared had concerned me as well. What did we come up with? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. The head warrior's brown eyes met my own.
I'll brief you about that subject shortly. That's not the worst of it, though. There has been another assassination.
I didn't even bother to hide my surprise. Again? Who was it this time? His eyes narrowed as his lips formed a thin line.
There was an incident early this morning. A group of robbers came in and aggressed the bank. Some people were caught in the crossfire. One of the director's wives included.
I stared at the head warrior in disbelief. How can you be certain that it was an assassination? From what you described, it seemed like she was just a casualty. A weary look took a hold of the aged man's face.
We managed to catch one of the robbers before he committed suicide. His eyes were enough to tell us what we needed to know.
Shock took a strong hold on me. I tried to speak, but the words refused to come out. From the corner of my eyes, Delta appeared incredibly stiff. The head warrior continued.
Our investigation concluded that a hit was placed on the director's wife. The Phantoms possibly recruited random thugs from the street and instructed them on not killing just her, but also other bystanders to prevent public suspicion. Most civilians still believe that the Phantom threat died out years ago.
All I could do was stare at the man's dark eyes. The contact's warning replayed in my mind over and over again. We may have traitors after all, I thought. I was startled as the head warrior placed a gloved hand on my shoulder. He attempted to smile in reassurance. I blinked rapidly and self-consciously rolled my shoulders. The head warrior moved his hand. He then seemed to have noticed Agent Delta's presence, for he narrowed his eyes.
Who are you?
He asked.
I'm Agent Moore's guardian. The directors assigned me to protect her.
Delta replied back coolly. The head warrior grunted in response.
Yes. Agent Delta.
The old man continued to stare at Delta like a specimen under the microscope. I was amazed at how he didn't cower under the head warrior's intense stare. Personally, I would have probably pissed my pants. The sound of the door opening once more interrupted the extreme macho show-up between the two men. A woman around her mid to late 20s came out of the room. I couldn't help but stare openly as I took in the sight of her. To say that she was pretty would have been an understatement. Wrapped around her very curvy body was a dress-like robe over black leggings that had slits running down its sides where weapons could have been holstered. As I looked down, I noticed that she had a pair of long combat boots that came up to her knees. I glanced at her face and was met with a very attractive smile. They made her blue eyes gleam. Her long brown hair flowed past her shoulders. All in all, it made me very self-conscious of my appearance, as I was just wearing a pair of jeans and a simple blouse. The head warrior cleared his throat.
Agent Moore, this is Agent Elvira. She is a weapons expert and will aid you in your next mission.
I glanced at the head warrior in curiosity. Another mission? I asked. The man nodded.
Indeed.
He replied simply.
I'll explain the full details once you meet up with your other team members. Hill revealed the location of a supposed Phantom lab.
I raised an eyebrow. You managed to get all that information out of him? I asked in slight disbelief. Amusingly, the head warrior seemed to have turned red as he turned away.
Well, actually, it was her who found that out.
He answered as he pointed to Elvira. I glanced at the woman in curiosity. How did you manage to coax him to talk? I asked. She smiled.
Well, there are certain tricks in dealing with uncooperative men,
she replied and winked. Her comment brought a smile to my face. I had a feeling that we would get along just fine. The head warrior coughed.
Alright, the mission briefing is this way. Follow me, agents.
The three of us followed him into another room, 2 hallways down from where we were. We arrived outside the door, which the head warrior opened. He stepped inside and allowed us to go in first. Once we were in, the sound of chatter paused abruptly. Inside were 2 men playing cards. Once they noticed our presence, they hurriedly placed the deck away. The one with brown hair chuckled sheepishly. I raised an eyebrow at their childlike behavior, but refrained from commenting on it. The head warrior came in and gestured us to sit. I took a seat on the side closest to the door, while Agent Delta sat beside me. Agent Elvira was on the other side of the 2 men. The head warrior coughed to get our attention.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin this briefing.
He pointed a small remote at the smart screen, and it lit up. On the screen projected an image of hell.
Just over 12 hours ago, Agent Moore and Delta captured a man named Martin Hill. He has had contact with the Phantoms on several occasions. During our interrogation with him, we uncovered serious Phantom intel.
He paused as he looked around for our reactions. We were all tense as we waited for the last bit of information.
You will be deployed to Rome, Italy. From there, you are to infiltrate an abandoned Phantom lab, which supposedly used to house experiments. Hill hasn't revealed the nature of these experiments, which is why you are to gather any information you can, and destroy the lab. There is no need for more abominations on this planet.
He finished, a look of disgust planted on his scarred face. Soft murmuring sliced through the thick silence like a knife through hot butter. The head warrior straightened his posture.
Alright everyone, it's time to get associated with each other.
He looked at me.
Agent Moore, these are Agents Gizmo and Olsen. Gizmo will be your tech expert and will keep you informed on any detail involving communications and intelligence.
The man who put the cards away waved at me. A grin plastered on his face. The head warrior continued.
Agent Olsen is a scout like you. However, he is more experienced in reconnaissance in Phantom territory.
The man with shoulder-length curly hair smiled and waved at me.
Agent Delta here is Agent Moore's assigned guardian, and you've already met Agent Elvira. She will assist you with any interrogations should you manage to capture a Phantom agent alive, as well as be your weapons expert. Once on site, 2 additional agents will join you. I'll be staying here to maintain the link between you and HQ. You'll be sending your mission reports to me.
Agent Olsen spoke.
Shouldn't there be more agents assigned to this mission? Entering Phantom territory, even abandoned, is a risky operation.
The head warrior nodded.
You're absolutely right, but I have confidence in all of your abilities. Besides, the less agents there are, the less chance there is of your mission being compromised.
He then turned to face me.
You all will be answering to Agent Moore while on site. She will be running this operation.
My eyes widened as I stared at the head warrior, to look for any signs of a bluff. He held my gaze confidently. A feeling of nausea threatened to overwhelm me. I was the loner scout who preferred to hang around in the morgue than lead a team of specialists. The head warrior nodded once more.
Alright everyone, you have your orders. You'll be departing this evening. Dismissed.
With that, the 3 newcomers packed up and left the room. It was just me, the head warrior, and Agent Delta. The head warrior motioned to the both of us.
Now that the others are gone, we have one last meeting with the directors.
I nearly grimaced, though I followed the older man nonetheless. We arrived at the elevator and went up a few levels. During the entire ride, it took a lot of my willpower to stay still. My mind was swirling with the numerous shocking news I received one after another. The director's wife assassination, investigating a phantom lab, me being put in charge. It was overwhelming. The elevator stopped at our level, and we made our way to the director's room. Surprisingly, the secretary wasn't at her desk, though one of the guards nodded at us and let us through. We stepped inside the gloomy room, and right away, the atmosphere was different. Even with the dim lights, the room never gave off such a strong feeling of helplessness as it did when we walked in. The head warrior stepped in front of Delta and I, facing the directors.
I have briefed the agents on their mission.
Very good.
A voice said quietly.
Agent Moore, please step forward.
I blinked in surprise before I did what I was told. The head warrior stepped back to allow me more space. My whole body tensed as the directors focused their undivided attention on me.
Hello again, Agent Moore.
The female director greeted.
These present events have caused havoc among our organization.
After a thorough investigation among our ranks, we have alarming results.
A third director added.
A good third of our agents are either spies or have had some form of contact with the Phantoms. To what extent we still don't know. Either way, our organization is in a very vulnerable position.
Another female director added.
We believe that number may even rise up to 50%.
We now have a better idea of how Martin Hill, and perhaps countless other individuals like him, were able to have access to our classified information.
The first female director stated. I stared at the directors in shock. I then remembered the clear warning the contact gave me.
If you think your pitiful organization is incorruptible, then you're in for a rude awakening.
I carefully worded my question. What do you intend on doing with them?
Nothing.
A director said quietly. I was taken aback. What? I said in disbelief. Why? This is your chance. You now have proof of who they really are.
If we take an aggressive course of action against them, they'll overwhelm our organization before we can fight back.
I was about to retort when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped and turned around to see Delta give me a stern look. His lips were thin lines as he shook his head. I slightly glared at him before I turned to face the directors. Delta lifted his strong hand from my shoulder. A slow sigh came from one figure.
The only thing we can do is pretend ignorance while we continue to assess the situation and carefully develop a plan of action.
It has been decided that we, the directors, will resign from our posts until the threat has been dealt with.
The female director said.
The incident from this morning was the turning point.
I took in a sharp breath. What are the rest of us supposed to do then?
The heads of each rank that are our allies have been strictly instructed to carry out missions as normal, while discreetly picking out the traitors within their ranks.
A tense silence nearly choked me. I harshly let out a breath before I stepped back against the wall. Delta was instantly at my side, observing me worriedly. I ignored him as I stared at the directors. My mouth was open wide in horror. The head warrior snarled quietly.
This was too much for her. Should have left her out of this.
Agent Moore is one of the only agents we trust with this information. She needs to know, especially with her risk.
I stared at them in confusion. What risk? I'm just a goddamn scout agent.
Surely you understand how your secret roots make you a target.
The second female director remarked. I growled and glared at the dark figures. Shut the hell up! I'm sick of hearing you bring that up. I'm my own person, not some prodigy who has to be constantly reminded of what her capabilities should be. Another tense silence gripped the room in its device-like embrace. The head warrior cursed under his breath and rubbed his forehead as if soothing a headache. Delta once again placed his hand on my shoulder.
Are you alright?
I merely shook my head as I didn't trust my voice to speak rationally. As one, all the directors stood up.
We apologize for such startling news. We meant it when we said that you were one of the only agents we trust. Knowing everything that is going on within our organization is not a pleasant duty, but it is vital in order to keep the control.
We wish you luck on your mission.
Another male said before all the directors walked out through another door. I continued to lean against the wall. My legs trembled uncontrollably as Delta rubbed my shoulder. He then growled.
What the hell was that for? What did you plan on happening by having her listen to all this?
The head warrior narrowed his eyes.
I had no idea what their intentions were. I'm just as shocked as you are.
Stop, I whispered. Both men looked at me in surprise. I shook my head before I looked at my guardian. I need air, I said. His eyes widened before he nodded and helped me walk steadily back to the elevator. We all got in and waited quietly as it went up. After a few seconds, the head warrior spoke.
You are not to tell anyone of our meeting with the directors. Complete your mission and come home safely.
I looked at the head warrior who was glaring fiercely at the floor. I hesitated, but finally mustered up some courage. Sir? He looked up.
Yes, Agent Moore?
I swallowed before I spoke. Why did you pick me to lead? Any one of the other agents seemed very capable to lead this mission. The head warrior's glare softened.
I chose you, Agent Moore, because you are by far the most capable agent of this group. Whether you realize this or not, you are truly talented. Don't doubt yourself, Rachel.
The use of my first name snapped me to attention. I was momentarily at a loss of speech, unsure of how to react. Thank you. I trilled on. The head warrior's small smile wrinkled on his lips.
My name is Pete,
he replied. With that, he exited the elevator and left me to reflect. The door closed once again and continued to go up. My breathing slowed down, though it was merely a provocation away from a breakdown. The elevator door then opened and revealed the busy area of the main entrance. I stared at all the people walking about, wondering who was a friend and who wasn't. Delta gently took hold of my shaking hand and gestured forward.
I won't let anyone hurt you,
he said soothingly. I gulped quietly before I nodded my head. We stepped out and walked into the flow. As we passed by various people, I tightened my grip on Delta's hand. Despite the raw fear I felt, I absolutely believed in the Guardian's promise.